In this video, we're going to introduce you to how to scan a network or a computer using the free and open source software called Nmap. This video is brought to you by the National Cybersecurity Training and Education Center out of Whatcom Community College. The creation of this video was funded by a National Science Foundation Advanced Technological Education grant. My name is Philip Kreger. I'm an Associate Professor of Cybersecurity at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. So the first thing we need to do, obviously, is to install Nmap. Now, if you're running this on one of your computer labs at school, you might already have Nmap installed. But I'm going to assume that you don't have it installed, so that's the first step. And I'm assuming also that you're running Windows. The next thing we're going to talk about is an overview of Nmap, what it is and what it does and how you use it. Next, we're going to select a network or a computer to scan. In fact, we'll do both. And then I'll show you how to run Nmap. And I'm just going to show you how to run a single type of scan, as there's many scans. In fact, there's actual entire courses in how to use Nmap. And finally, we'll look at the actual results of a network scan. Just so you're aware, this is a very high-level overview of Nmap to introduce you to the concept of network or computer scanning. If you want more detailed videos on Nmap, you can find plenty of those out there on YouTube. In fact, there are actual entire courses that you can take in how to use Nmap. That's how complicated it can be. So here I'm running my own version of Windows. And so we need to go and visit using our browser. I'm going to open up Firefox here. And we're going to go to the website nmap.org. And here you see the website. It's not a particularly well done website, but it's got a lot of information about what Nmap is and how to use it and how to interpret the results. But let's go up here. You see under Intro, let's go to Downloads. And here's where you will download all of the different files for different operating systems. And they have it for pretty much, I think, every conceivable operating system, which is wonderful. Right in here, they have Nmap-7.8-setup.exe, which is what we want to download right in here. And so we're going to click on that, and then we're going to download that, save file, and then we can go to File Explorer and go to Downloads, and there's our Nmap setup executable. We're going to double click on that, and then we're going to get our user account control. It's asking us whether we want to install Nmap. We're going to click on Yes, and this is our end user license agreement. You should always read an end user license agreement because it indicates to you legally what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And I'm a speed reader, and done. Agree. This asks you where you want to install all the different components of Nmap, which I usually just say, yep, that looks okay, next. This is asking you what the destination folder is, and usually the defaults in any of these installations is usually a pretty good guess, unless there's some reason to place it somewhere else. So I'm going to click on Install, and then it's going to install something also called NPCAP. We're going to click on Agree, and we're going to go with the defaults in here, and that's just NPCAP being installed, all those little flashes from the command line. That's okay, there's nothing to worry about there. And it's completed. We click Next, and then we can click on Finish. Next, and we'll click Yes, create those shortcuts, and we'll click Finish. And then we can close this window. We can close this window. Now we see right down in here, notice this says Nmap-Zenmap. So Nmap is actually the base program, which typically is run from the command line. But there's also a front end to it that is a graphical user interface called Zenmap. And so we're going to be using Zenmap because, again, this is an overview. This is not for people who want to get in-depth into Nmap, which usually the people, the system administrators or experts who use this tool all the time are probably going to be running Nmap from the command line. But this is just a demonstration to show you how this works. And so we double click on that, and that's what it looks like. And that's really small. And because I'm running this on a virtual server that's located several dozen miles from me, this is why it looks like this. I really can't make this any bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my own personal iMac and run it from there because it's going to be much easier to see and the graphical user interface looks exactly the same. Okay, so what is the purpose of running Nmap? Well, if you're a systems administrator, let's say, and you're in a company with hundreds or let's say even thousands of computers that are located on different floors or even in different buildings located across different parts of the city or the state or the country, how do you know which computers are running and what services they have exposed? And that just means what services they have running. And by services, I mean things like whether it's a web server or an email server or things of that nature. Because how do you know what and how to protect the computers on your network if you aren't fully aware what is connected? Because the whole idea behind cybersecurity is you have to know what is running, what assets you have, and what is running on your network in order to protect them. So that's from a systems administrator viewpoint. So also, you've probably read something about white hat hackers. So white hat hackers are usually external consultants that are hired by your company to do something called penetration testing. And all penetration testing is to try to identify the vulnerabilities in your networks. And so this is one of the tools that white hat hackers use as the first steps for penetration testing. In order to try to determine if they can penetrate into your company's network, they have to know what kind of computers you have, what their IP addresses are, what kind of services are running, and so on. And finally, Nmap is also used by malign actors. The whole point is, in order to protect your network, you need to know what's running on your network. And there's no way, if you're in a building, let's say in a simple case, a building with 50 or 100 computers on different floors, there's no way that a systems administrator is going to be able to physically walk around and check each of those. So what information does Nmap provide? Well, first, it provides the IP addresses of the computers that are running in your network. Second, it's able to identify the services that are running on each computer along usually with the version number of the service. And also, it can try to guess at what the operating system is. And it also does more. But again, this is just a simple overview. So I just mentioned that the malign actors use scanning. That's absolutely correct. But also, systems administrators also use network scanning because it's a tool in their toolbox. So this is a really good site that kind of lays out whether port scanning is illegal or not. Port scanning is essential to network security. IT companies scan systems every day. They help to confirm network configurations and compliance with security policies. But hackers also scan systems. They use scanners to gather information on potential targets and their vulnerabilities. As a result, port scans can be seen as precursors to attack. Millions, if not billions, of unauthorized scans occur every day, and in one study spanning 12 years, a single site received 23.4 billion scans. So with their role in cyber attacks and the ubiquitous use by IT firms and security consultants, that's those white hat hackers, a question is raised, are port scans legal? So, as it turns out, in the US, there's no federal law that exists to ban port scanning. However, at the state and local level, there are no clear guidelines that exist. And that's very important. So, it depends on your locale where you're doing it if you're going to be scanning somebody's network. However, while not explicitly illegal, port and vulnerability scanning without permission can get you into trouble through civil lawsuits or complaints to your ISP. So in conclusion, the amount of risk associated with a port scan is largely based on whether it's authorized. So if you do not receive permission, then you're at a greater risk of backlash, like those civil lawsuits or complaints to the ISP. If you did receive permission, then get it in writing and signed. So now let's get to the fun part and let's actually scan a system. And so when we double click on the Nmap application, this is what it looks like. So it's got our toolbar up here in the upper left hand corner. Right here in this box that it indicates it's a target, that is what we're going to scan. First we're going to scan a computer that's a part of nmap.org, and it was actually set up to be scanned. And then down here under the command, this actually shows you the default scan and the parameters, which we're really not going to get into, for something called an intent scan. And the intent scan is one that provides you a lot of the information discussed previously. For example, the IP addresses of the computers, the services they're running, and also a guess as to the operating system. And so let's go ahead first and just scan the computer called scanme.nmap.org. scanme.nmap.org. And once we do that, then we can start looking at some of the information that's provided by Nmap. For example, some of the information regarding the output, ports and hosts, the network topology, host details, and so on. So now we can move over here to the right to the scan button and click on scan. And you see it very quickly starts populating our results box. And it's really not very easy to read this, but what I'm going to do is point out the important information from the scan. And it took about maybe a minute to run this scan, and we know that it's done. If you go to the bottom, it will say Nmap is done down here in the bottom left hand corner. Then we can scroll back to the top, and we see that Nmap will actually use a lot of different scripts for the scanning, and that's just based on the type of profile scan that you're running. And it always defaults to intent scan, but you can choose another scan if you wish. Here on this line, it shows that we're scanning scanme.nmap.org, but it also gives the IP address of that computer, including the fact that there's 4 ports open on this computer. So just with a click of the button, we've determined a lot about this target. And these 4 lines indicate that there are 4 ports open. That is, there are 4 services that are running on this computer. Port 22, port 80, 9929, and 31337. If we get onto this line, it says it's trying to guess the operating system that's running on this computer. And it's also running something called traceroute, and I'll show you what that is shortly. If we move down to this line, it says that there are 999 ports that were scanned, but that were closed. That is, there's no services running on those ports. It also shows below this, the 22 TCP, that it's running a service called Secure Shell, or SSH. And it also shows the version number right here. And it also gives a hint as to what type of operating system is running, because this says Ubuntu Linux, and it's SSH protocol 2.0. And this shows you the SSH host keys, which I'm not going to explain, but your instructor will know more about this and explain this to you at the appropriate time. If we move down from there, we see that port 80 is open, and most of you should know that that's going to be HTTP, as it says here. And it says it's a running Apache HTTPD, that's the HTTP daemon, and then the version number 2.4.7 Ubuntu. And it's interesting, it also shows the HTTP title is to go ahead and scan me, which is kind of cute because that's the only reason that the people associated with Nmap have this computer up and running, is just for people who want to use Nmap to go ahead and scan it. And then you have 2 other ports right here, 9929 and 31337, and it shows what the actual services are in here, which we're not going to get into right now. Now below this, it says aggressive OS guesses. And so what this means is that Nmap is trying to guess the version of the operating system. And it has a certain little magic that it works for those, but sometimes it can get it pretty much pinpoint on as to the guess as the operating system, and sometimes it does its best. And you see here that it's showing you the potential kernel numbers and the probability or the possibility this computer is running one of these kernels, and it shows you that's Linux, and it's pretty much Linux all the way, but it's really unsure as to the kernel version number. Notice that it also shows you the uptime, that is the amount of time since the computer was last rebooted. So it says it was last rebooted 27.74 days ago on June 16th. It also shows you the number of hops in between my computer and scanme.nmap.org, and it says there's 13 hops. That means that from my computer to there, it went through other routers. And this below here will show you the trace route. So it shows you not only the routers here, notice that I'm on a system called Spectrum, that's my ISP, and it shows you the IP addresses of all of these routers in between. And of course the final hop is to scanme.nmap.org, and again that's the IP address. And then finally this says Nmap is done. So we scanned one IP address and one host. Now let's go up here to these tabs and let's click on the ports and host, and it gives you a little easier view of, or a little more understandable view of what's going on. So it shows you again, there's the 4 ports. Notice that these are in green, meaning these are running. It shows you the port number, the protocol, TCP, transmission control protocol that's being used, the fact that their state is open, and the exact service. If we go to topology, this shows you, actually, let me see if I can zoom in here. This shows you me right here. I'm the local host, and notice here is Nmap, here is scanme.nmap.org, and this is all of the hops in between all of the network internet routers all the way to our target. And then we can click on host details, and it shows you just the status, the fact that it's up, the number of open ports, the number of closed ports. Notice the fact that it only scanned 1,000 ports. Remember, there's a lot more ports than 1,000. There's 65,536 ports, both for TCP and UDP. And if you didn't understand that, just wait, your instructor will explain that. This is the amount of seconds and uptime, and we saw that that was something like 27 days, and the time of the last boot. It shows you what the Internet Protocol version 4 address is for this host. It shows you the host names that we used. It shows you the guess as to what the version of the operating system is. And this would be the Linux kernel 2.6.32 to -3.13. And if we want to, we can go down and look at some of the other information, but that's really not as important for an overview. And the really cool thing about Nmap is you can save your scans. And so if you ever want to go back and bring this information back up and still have all this information parsed like this, you can do that. So another way to run Nmap is from the command line. And this is what I'm doing here, and I'm not going to do that because it's the exact same commands as we used with Nmap, only you're doing this from the command line, and it doesn't format it as nicely. It's going to just format this as text that's going to be running off the screen. So if you want to run Nmap very quickly, this is an easy way to do it. Otherwise, I would suggest to go ahead and use Nmap. And also because you're just learning how to do port scanning, Nmap is a very nice tool because it actually parses all the information for you. But at some point in time, more than likely, you will be running Nmap from the command line. Oh, and by the way, when you run Nmap and Nmap, you're going to have to run it as administrator, or under Linux or under the Mac, you're going to have to run it as root, which is the same thing as administrator under Windows. So what did we learn? Well, Nmap is a free and open source software tool that provides network scanning capabilities. It's used heavily by systems administrators, probably on a daily basis. And you can install Nmap and Nmap on your own home computer, and it doesn't really matter what operating system your computer is running, you can install it. And you don't need permission to scan your own network. That is your home network. However, do not scan any network to which you have not received authorization, and that includes written permission. So what I would suggest is, if you want to play around with Nmap and learn more about it, is to scan, let me type this in here, scanme.nmap.org. So try that. This video was brought to you by the National Cybersecurity Training and Education Center out of Whatcom Community College.